You're listening to the Mind Over Murder podcast.
My name is Bill Thomas. I'm a writer, consulting producer, and now podcaster. I am now trying to use my experience as the brother of a murder victim to help other victims of violent crime. I'm working on a book on the unsolved Colonial Parkway Murders, and I'm the co-administrator of the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook group, together with Kristen Dilley.
My name is Kristen Dilley. I'm a writer, a researcher, a teacher, and a victims advocate, as well as the social media manager and co-administrator for the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook page with my partner in crime, Bill Thomas. Welcome to Mind Over Murder. I'm Kristen Dilley.
And I'm Bill Thomas.
And we're joined today by Nina Instead, host of the hit podcast Already Gone. Nina, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
I want your voice.
So do I.
You have such a gorgeous voice.
Thank you.
People have said this before, I know.
Yes, I get a lot of feedback on my voice. Some people think it's, how do I put it, not appropriate for a true crime podcast.
Why?
I don't know.
Little too sultry.
Yeah.
You know what? You could do audiobooks for a living.
Yeah.
Honest to goodness.
Or voiceover.
You really could.
Or voiceover, or all of the above.
Would love to.
All right.
Maybe someday. Yeah.
In your copious free time.
Seriously. Between all of the work that you do. Nina, start by telling us about your podcast, please.
I host Already Gone, which is a true crime podcast focused on Michigan and the Great Lakes region. The podcast goes back to 2016, so if you're interested, there's a nice big back catalog to dive into. When I'm not working on the podcast, I am a certified victims advocate and a missing persons advocate with the Missing in Michigan organization.
That actually was more perfect of an introduction than I could have possibly given. Can you give us a little bit more information, though, about Missing in Michigan? What drew you to it, first of all, and then what's a typical day like for you at Missing in Michigan?
So I initially joined the Missing in Michigan Facebook group because I had started the podcast and I was looking for material. I was looking for cases to cover. As time went on, I started helping Mary Cross, who ran the group, for Sarah Krebs. Sarah works for the Michigan State Police. She's an inspector, but she does the Missing in Michigan group on the side. I was helping Mary. She made me an administrator of the site, so I was co-running the site with her. And then Mary died unexpectedly in 2019.
Oh my gosh, we're so sorry.
Thank you. And it was really hard because I had just lost my father a few weeks earlier, like in middle May. And then at the beginning of June, Mary passed away. And we were planning this move to Atlanta at the time. I just realized that if I didn't step up for Missing in Michigan for the online portion of the organization, the group would go away. And the group is a huge resource for families of newly missing and long-term missing. So I wanted to keep it going. So I said, you know what, I can do this online work remotely from Georgia. And that's what I did. I stepped up, I kept the group going, and we actually grew and expanded the group. It's over 130,000 people at this point.
Wow.
That's amazing to have such a
cool.
large base of people helping and following.
Yes. We
fantastic.
really work hard to be a good community member and a good support to, like I said, families of the newly missing and the long-term missing.
You're now moving back to Michigan from Atlanta.
Yes, that is the plan. Hopefully by the end of this year, I will be back in the Detroit area.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Thank you. I'm excited.
So we wanted to bring you on today, Nina, to talk about an issue that is appearing with increasing frequency in groups like Missing in Michigan, which is the issue of scam or fake missing posters. Can you start us off by talking about why anyone would even want to create a fake poster or a scam poster? And I think you've probably got a better grasp on the vocabulary than we do. I don't know what you'd like to call it, but I've just been calling it scam posters. Why would anybody want to do this?
So they're definitely scams, and they're super frustrating for the community because nobody wants to be tricked. And what these scammers do, they create a fake post on social media and they'll say something like, flood your feeds. missing child or missing senior. And it's this cute kid with freckles that looks so wholesome and that they're missing from this generic community. Like they'll give you a city name, like maybe Taylor. Contact local police if you hear anything, but there's no phone number. There's nobody to contact. And then the post gets shared widely. And then within a day or two, the post changes. And it's no longer this cute missing child or this friendly looking missing senior. It's a house that's for sale or rent, or it's a property, an apartment that's available, or it's a cleaning crew that'll come to your home for a price. So they create the fake scammy posts to get it widely shared. And once it's widely shared, they change it.
When they make the change to whatever it is they're selling, how is it that information ends up in all the other places where it was shared? If you change the original content, does the shared content also change?
Yes. And that's just how posting on Facebook works. And as a missing persons advocate, I'm grateful for that, because when I post someone who's missing, if I find them, I can then go back and edit the post to say, hey, good news, we found this person.
Right.
So all of the shared posts now reflect the good news that the person was located, but it also can reflect the really crummy news that they've got a condo for rent.
I've never heard of this before. I've certainly seen my share of missing persons notifications, and I have seen found, which is always happy news, hopefully. And then
Yes.
sometimes you get the very sad news if someone's found deceased. At the same time, I think it is important to let people know that someone's been found, even if they are no longer with us, because
Yes.
people are concerned. And I think to that extent, it's important that the Facebook, for example, software works this way. I've never seen anybody morph a missing persons poster into some crappy I've got a condo or I've got a cleaning service scam. But this does happen.
It does, unfortunately. And there were a few photos that were making the rounds. I actually have them posted in the Missing in Michigan group. Hey, this is a fake post. Please don't share it. Or they'll share a child that was missing 2 or 3 years ago, like it's a brand new post. And it's not. Sharing an old post of someone that was missing and has been found is actually super invasive. It invades their privacy. It impacts how they're living their life these days, especially if it's a child. They shouldn't have that following them around.
Sure, absolutely. So then it sounds like the end goal for someone who's out there creating these scammy posts is financial gain, or is it data mining too? Or what is the end goal behind this? Does it all just come down to money?
It all comes down to money.
Oh.
And I think that a lot of the time, the property that's for rent or the cleaning service that's available or the car detailing business isn't even real.
We're both shaking our heads. This whole thing is so maddening. I wanted to ask Kristen to talk to us a little bit about the Autumn Cleveland missing persons case, which is what raised this question and concern for us.
Yeah, this is the reason that I reached out to Nina frantically on Wednesday was because there is a local case here, and this was a friend of a friend. So not someone I know directly, but we have several friends in common who had posted on Facebook that her daughter had gone missing while in Maine. She, of course, was very distraught, as any parent would be, and wanted to get the information out there as quickly as possible. And so she put together first a post, and then people in the comments were advising her, here, make an actual poster, include this number of photos, put in height, weight, what she was last wearing, what's the make and model of her car, all of this stuff. You could see this happening in real time and unfolding. And I was monitoring the post throughout the day, and you could see she was like, oh, here, I did a poster. Here's the latest that I have. And then people were advising, here are some various groups that you could probably post in. And they were tagging various groups and things like that. It all looked like this is what you would do if you were a parent with a missing kid. The problem came a little bit later in the day when I had shared the post and people started writing back to me, I think this is fake. Like, why would you be sharing this? Do you know this person? This doesn't look real. And I'm sitting there going, why would you think it's fake? Of course it's real. And I finally had a number of people like actually private message me and go, I think you posted a scam or a fake. And I'm like, no, I didn't. And I'm trying to explain, here's how I know that it's not fake. And it really just ended up being a whirlwind for me trying to figure out, why do so many people think that this is a scam? And that just confounded me. And it did turn out later, unfortunately, that Autumn was found in Maine. When she was located, she was already gone. So it did turn out that this was real, which I knew that it was, but of course, lots of people out across the internet did not know that it was real. But I was really just baffled by this idea of people making scam posts. And I was very curious about, number one, why do people do this? And also, number two, what are the red flags that would alert to someone, hey, this is a scam post? So I definitely want you to talk about that next, Nina.
So first of all, I'm sorry about your friend's friend. That's very sad. That's never the outcome that we want.
No, not ever.
Unfortunately, running the Missing in Michigan group, where we put very prominently in the rules you agree to when you join the group that we vet all content. You have no idea how many calls I make to law enforcement agencies to go, hey, you got a missing person? I just want to confirm. Mm-hmm. And people still come into our group and go, oh, it's a scam, it's fake. And I'm like, no, we've got name, age, description, location last seen, and police contact information. And that's the biggie.
Right.
If you see a post that has a police department phone number in it, it's real. Or I'm 95% sure it's real. The other thing comes from Kansas. What was it? No, Garden City Police Department in Kansas. And they put out this great little meme that said, missing persons flyers do not originate in yard sale groups. When your person goes missing, you don't go to the yard sale group and post it. You post in a community group, you post in a neighborhood group, but you don't post in a yard sale group unless you're trying to sell something.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. You were telling us that these posts morph and turn into something else. I was baffled. We obviously have listeners all over the country and even all over the world. I noticed our Australian numbers keep growing for some reason.
Excellent.
But, because we've covered the Colonial Parkway murders from the day we started, we have a heavy listenership in Virginia, and we appreciate that. Autumn, who was the missing person, was a 20-something from Virginia. But there was something about the fact that Autumn had traveled to Maine, which she had done, that somehow threw people off. And Kristen and I were both looking at each other going, people do travel. And actually, sometimes when people go missing, they are en route from one place to another. Some of it may be escaping their troubles or whatever, or they could just be on vacation. There's a million reasons for somebody to hit the road. But something about Autumn's travel from her home base of Virginia to Maine, where she was ultimately found, that somehow threw people off.
Which I find strange because the most well-known missing persons case of the last few years is Gabby Petito. And what was she doing when she went missing? Yeah, she was traveling.
Traveling with her boyfriend, fiance.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know why people would be put off by the information. Like, it's not hard to figure out. She went missing. This Virginia native went missing while visiting Maine. Straightforward.
No, it doesn't seem like you would need to think all that hard about it. But throughout the day, I had people sending me messages, friends of mine or friends of friends, who were like, hey, this post over at this, I'm not going to call out a group name here.
Okay.
But there's a post over at this prominent Facebook group about a county in our area. And there's somebody over there stating this looks like a scam post because she's from here, but they're posting in Maine. I was like, where do you get that from? I don't understand. What do you mean? Also later that day in the same group, there was one of those posting from a yard sale group. Here's 2 pictures of a random missing kid and a message saying, kid was found at this local police office. Please share everywhere. And it was like, that's a scam. Like, how are you not recognizing that's a scam and the actual missing persons poster with information, like you said, from a police department and all this other information? How were people not getting the difference between these two? And it looked like there were some people who weren't.
The other popular scam post is there'll be 2 pictures of a purebred dog. Maybe it's an Irish setter. Maybe it's a husky and it'll say, oh, we found this dog. They were sick and dehydrated. Does anyone know the owner? Hashtag city name. And that's another very popular scam post because the missing persons posts are getting noticed as being fake. So now they've switched to dogs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nothing like tugging at the heartstrings.
Exactly.
If it can't be missing people or missing kids, it's going to be missing cute dogs or found cute dogs.
Right.
So then what are some strategies for reading and interpreting these posts to determine whether or not they're real or fake? Because obviously people were taken in they sat for a while and thought that maybe Autumn's stuff was fake. And then I also saw on the very obvious scam post, there were still plenty of people clicking, sharing, liking, commenting. It's like, what kind of primer do we have to help people understand? Here's how you can tell if a post is fake or if it's real.
We talked about the yard sale groups. So one of the things to look at is where does the post originate? Does it come from a missing persons group like Missing in Michigan or the Aware Foundation or a police department or an organization like Crime Stoppers? Those are legitimate sources of information on missing persons. Then look at the information included in the post. And as someone who works with families of newly missing every day, when people are making posts about a missing child or a missing parent or a missing loved one, they're upset. They're not thinking clearly. So we sometimes get posts that say, Janie Jones, missing from Clarkston. Call 911 if you see her. And it's, honey, that Clarkston what?
Yeah.
Where is Clarkston?
There's a lot of Clarkstons.
If I call 911, if this person goes missing from Dunwoody, Georgia, and I see them in the city of Atlanta and call 911, Atlanta City Police are going to go, what? Who? You need to call the other police department. So you want to have that proper police number to contact in the post. Always. Never, ever put a personal contact information. So many of my families end up with extortion attempts. And I apologize. I'm getting a little preachy. I just see this all the time and it makes me so frustrated. But people don't know. They put their personal phone number in there and then they get a call saying, I'll tell you where she is if you send me $200.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
And these are people who are legitimately looking for someone who's missing, be it adult or child.
Yes. They are legitimately looking for a missing loved one, and they hopefully they're very hopeful when they put their phone number in the post that someone's going to call and go, oh, I've got them right here. They're at the Dairy Queen. And it ends up being a scammer that's calling them.
Ugh. And what we've found, and we consider ourselves part of a larger true crime community, I feel like people in the true crime community want to help.
Yeah.
And they...
Absolutely.
Any of us can be taken in by fake news, if you will. Someone saying that there's a missing person is something that tugs at the heartstrings, and you want to help without some sort of, as you said, some vetting so that we know that this is real. Do you find that with the families that really are missing someone, are they open to the coaching that you and other advocates can provide to walk them through, here's how you do get the word out about your missing loved one?
By and large, yes, they are. I do run into families where the missing person might be unhoused or maybe struggling with addiction issues or may have a criminal record. Then they're less likely to want to include law enforcement because they're worried their person's going to end up behind bars. They're worried that they're going to be hurt again by law enforcement not taking it seriously. They're worried that law enforcement is not going to respect them when they reach out and looking for support. My belief, and the belief of most of the law enforcement agencies that I deal with, is that everybody deserves to be safe. Everybody deserves to be located. We'll worry about the bench warrant later. Let's make sure that they're someplace safe.
If a family has a missing loved one, what information, you've covered some of this, but I just want to make sure we've got all of it. What information should they make sure is on that poster so that people will look at it and go, oh, okay, this is real. This is legit. You had mentioned a contact information number for a local police department. What else should they be putting on there?
The first thing they should do when someone goes missing is call law enforcement. you do not have to wait 24 or 48 hours. That is a myth.
Yeah, but it was very prevalent, that urban myth.
Yes, and people still believe it, but you don't, especially if it's a missing child or a senior that has maybe some medical issues, you can report right away. So you want to have that law enforcement contact information in the post. That's super important. It adds an air of legitimacy to a post immediately. You want the person's name. You want what they were wearing, if you know what they were wearing. You want what they were driving, if you know if they left in a vehicle. What vehicle can I look for? Those are all important things to include in a missing persons post. A lot, like an organization like the Aware Foundation,
yes,
or Missing in Michigan, we will make a flyer for you.
You've got the format ready to go.
Yep. Or maybe you know someone who can use Canva and whip up a quick flyer for you. The flyers tend to be shared and respected more than just the photo with a little description on it. We make do when all we have is the photo and the little description. We get that shared, we get that circulating, we get that out in the public eye. The flyers tend to go a little further.
Something a little more, I guess what we'd think of as traditionally legitimate is what helps make people go, okay, this is real, not a fake.
Yes, if the post looks polished, people tend to believe it.
Professional presentation on some level. It doesn't have to be super slick, but some good clear photographs and good descriptions. The vehicle thing is incredibly important. Obviously, a young kid's not going to be driving a car, but lots of other people leave in a known vehicle.
Yes. Or unfortunately, we have a lot of teenagers that slip out of the house and are spotted getting into a car on a Ring doorbell. So then we know that they got into a silver Honda, or we may not have a great description, but maybe one of the kids' friends knows someone who drives that silver Honda, which helps the parents get closer to locating their child.
You're listening to Mind Over Murder. We'll be right back after this word from our sponsors. We're back here at Mind Over Murder. Before we get back to the podcast, just wanted to remind you that we have a GoFundMe effort going on right now. This campaign is designed to help us raise funds to help promote Mind Over Murder and specifically to push the Colonial Parkway Murders investigation forward. We'd love it if you could support us in any way that you can. Any donation from $5 to whatever you can afford is very much appreciated and will be incredibly helpful. The link is in the show notes and in our social media pages. As always, thanks for your support. Now back to Mind Over Murder.
The other thing that comes up, and I'm getting slightly off topic here, so bear with me, is there a runaway?
Yeah, and which is awfully dismissive.
It is.
Of a kid or a young person with maybe legitimate concern.
Yes, and you know what? Runaways end up in unsafe situations, and then it's an endangered missing advisory, and we're really worried. So I'm asking listeners to not be dismissive or judgmental if a child is a runaway. They don't know better. They deserve to be safe.
And we know a number of situations and cases that we've worked on and others where sometimes people were characterized as runaways, and maybe they did run away. There can be a million reasons for why they would be fleeing their home or the place that they live, which could extend up to them not feeling safe there. Whether that makes sense or not, that needs to be sorted out later, but let's at least find out where they are and make sure they're safe.
And I very infrequently come across cases where the child is unsafe at home and that's why they left. They usually leave because mom said, no, you can't hang out with that 20-year-old. No, you can't hang out with that much older person. And parents set a boundary and the kids, I know better. I'm going to hang out anyway.
And I'm 14 and this person is 25.
Yes. And we want those kids to be safe.
If a family has a missing loved one, what are the best groups to post to in order to get awareness out? You've mentioned the Aware Foundation already. What else, like on a sort of national level?
You would ask law enforcement to involve NCMEC, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and they put out posts. My only very minor criticism of NCMEC is they're not always as quick to take them down. But again, they're a wonderful resource for families with a missing child. Strongly advise NCMEC. Also, when you do file a police report, ask to sign a media release so that the law enforcement agency can immediately release information to the 6 o'clock news, the local newspaper. They'll get it out on social media also. It's another layer of awareness.
You'd already mentioned what I think is a great piece of advice, which is do not post to yard sale groups. What are other types of groups that people with legitimate missing family members should maybe steer clear from? There are some people I could see deciding, okay, maybe I will post to every single Facebook group out there in the state where my loved one was going because coverage is good, without maybe thinking, okay, maybe I shouldn't be posting to the yard sale group because it will be perceived as a scam or something like that.
I think it's more important to look for the legitimate groups, like being from Metro Detroit. There's Metro Detroit Crime and Homicide. There's Crime in the D. There's the Macomb County Scanner. There's Flint Police Operations. There's a really good Monroe County news group. Those are the groups to look for. I don't advise sharing to the larger generic true crime groups. I know one of the true crime groups I'm in, they're regularly posting missing persons from Australia, which is fine. But I'm not the eyes you need to get it in front of. You need to be in an Australia-centric a province. They're not called provinces in Australia. Doesn't matter. An Australia-centric group is where it needs to be posted, not in a generic crime group.
And unless we know, for instance, if that person from Australia has left the country, then let's try to stay focused on where it can do the most good. Got it.
Just curious, and you don't have to admit this if you don't want to, but I am curious. Has there ever been, is there ever a time when you were taken in by something that someone had posted, when it really looked to you like, okay, this really could legitimately be a missing person, and then it switched to condo, car service, purebred dog, or whatever? Have you ever been taken in by one?
I have not, because our group is run by law enforcement, so I have to have law enforcement contact in the post. I can't post something in our group, and I can't approve a post in our group unless there is police contact information. Okay. So as soon as I see something like that, I go and look at the originator of the post. And every single time I'm like, oh, this person's had a Facebook for 6 days.
Bad sign.
Bad sign.
Yeah. You
click on the originator and it says product or advertisement or cleaning service. No. This is not legitimate. So fortunately, and it's only because I have so much experience. I'm not denigrating anyone who's been tricked. You see a missing kid, you see a missing senior. Of course, your first reaction is, what can I do to help?
One of the things we were talking about off air a few minutes ago, Nina, that I wanted to revisit was I was saying how I felt like law enforcement wasn't very good in situations where someone is found, whether they're dead or alive. They're not very good about explaining later cause of death or what the outcome was. And you were reminding me that we may all be curious people, but we don't have a right to that information. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Sure. In the Missing in Michigan group, we use the term found as an angel, and that covers someone being found deceased, whether they were inflicted self-harm or if someone brought harm to them or if they were perhaps using illegal substances that led to their death. They were found as an angel because we support the families and we try not to focus on the really negative. It's a terrible outcome. It's never the outcome we want. It's never the outcome we expect. But we use the term found as an angel just to be gentle with the families and friends that are in the group. Now, I often know how a person was found and the circumstances surrounding them being recovered, but it's not for public consumption. That's private. And while I'm as curious as the next person, I have learned that I don't deserve to know. We talked off air about the baseball player whose daughter went missing, and people were like, "Ooh, I can't wait to get the scoop on this." Sorry, it's not your business. It's more than likely a medical issue, and that's personal and private. And while we do get invested, I 100% get invested in these cases that I work on, and I would love to know the details of how somebody was recovered when they're found alive. It's not my business. My business is to help them make it home, whatever that looks like.
I think as people who consume a lot of internet content, people start getting this idea that they're entitled to information because they are invested in it. And I think it's a great reminder that you just gave us, Nina, that yes, maybe you're interested And it's out of the goodness of your heart, but you're not entitled to know these things.
And there's nothing wrong with being curious. I understand. I think it's natural to want to know the resolution to the story, but we also have to respect the boundaries of the family, the missing person, and just understand that we're not going to know. I want to change gears slightly on this. I just read an article. There's a movement in Canada that when a person goes missing, they're not going to use their last name. They're going to use a photo and their first name so that when they are recovered, it does not follow them.
Oh, interesting.
I'm not pushing back, but does the lack of a last name, does that handicap someone that might be encountering this person? We're just going to call them Jane, for example, and not Jane Smith or whatever.
Yeah, my friend Kelly, she's a missing persons advocate. Her cousin Richie went missing in 1990. Kelly worked as a bus driver in the Kalamazoo area and stopped at a light and looked and spotted a missing girl. And she got out, she stopped the bus and got out and went, "Your mother is looking for you." And literally picked up, called the police and put one hand on her and called the police and found her. Kelly couldn't remember her name.
But she just
but
knew.
She'd seen her face. So I feel like you either know the person or would spot the person, and you don't necessarily need to know that Jane Lewandowski of Ottawa, Ontario, went missing in September of 2024, because those news stories are going to follow Jane Lewandowski for the rest of her life.
Yeah, I get it. And I know we've touched on this a little bit. Sometimes in these situations, these are people that will need ongoing assistance, help, whether it's dealing with a mental health issue, whatever it is. And that's going to be challenging enough without this internet browser history of following them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, or maybe she was fleeing an abusive relationship and went into hiding and couldn't tell anyone where she went. I've actually had that happen. So it's an interesting discussion. Do I think we need to implement it across the board? I don't know. If it's a missing young kid, maybe we do need to know their last name. Maybe they were kidnapped by a parent or a relative, and it would be helpful to know the last name. But if it's a missing adult and you've got a nice clear picture of their face, maybe you don't. And I'm not sold either way. I just thought it was an interesting idea and something to consider.
I have this romantic viewpoint of Canada. I've traveled to Canada a few times, but I'm not an expert by any means. I somehow have a romanticized vision of Canada as being like the United States, but with nicer people.
Yeah, and poutine.
And I think to myself, and Tim Hortons, that maybe that practice of just the first name would work in a wonderful place like Canada. Forgive me if I sound cynical when I'm speaking about the United States of America, where I happen to live.
Yeah. Yeah. And people would feel entitled to that last name.
Yeah, I do. I feel like when we talk about all of the upsides of the internet in helping to get information out about missing people, we are also just faced with a massive amount of problems that get compounded, such as that sense of entitlement. Everybody wants that story. It's the same impulse that will lead people to send Bill an email and say, "I'd like to see your sister's crime scene photos." You're not entitled to that.
No. It's so disrespectful.
Or I'd like an object that your sister Kathy owned that we want to put in our museum of serial killers. And I'm like, I'm not easily offended. I'm thinking to myself, what? Why do you think I would be interested in your museum of serial killers?
People feel a sense of entitlement to the stories that they're invested in and the people that they're invested in. And in one sense, I think that's what keeps all three of us in business here, you know, with the podcast and everything. So I guess I can't really get down on it too much. But we were talking off air, Nina, and I think you really said it best. Curiosity is one thing, because we're all curious. That is why we are interested in this sort of thing. The sense that you as a member of the public are entitled to know all aspects of something, you're not.
No. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. Curiosity is natural. You get invested in a story. You want to know the outcome, but we're not always entitled to the outcome. And oftentimes the kinder thing to do, if you really want to help, is leave them be.
Right. Pitch in, help them be found. But after that, when they're back in a place that's safe. We all need to step back and give them some space and some time. And
yes,
we can't really contribute to their well-being, I think, beyond that point. It's going to be up
Correct.
to the families or social services or whoever's involved.
Yeah, and no shade. I want to know too. I'm nosy, but it's the right thing to do is to just let it be.
We were talking to one of the family members in the Colonial Parkway Murders case yesterday who learned the truth about who murdered her sister this past January. And I was I was surprised when she said the media had largely left them alone after that news was revealed, because I honestly thought that they weren't going to. I would have assumed that she would have been hounded by the media, because everybody here locally knows the story, wants the story, and feels entitled to more information about the story. And so when Jeanette said yesterday the media had left them alone, I had a moment of shock, but good shock, when it was like, oh, wow, they did? Because when you get invested in any case, there is an audience out there that wants to be fed, and they want that information. They feel they're entitled to learn more about it.
Yeah, they do.
That was an interesting dynamic, because in Robin's case, her sister's case, there's a still strong possibility that may tie into the other Colonial Parkway murders. And so we are still probing and looking for more information, and quite frankly, pushing law enforcement to keep putting resources into this case. And things we asked them to do when they finally did them, he said through gritted teeth, wouldn't you know, it led directly to the identification of an offender who is deceased himself. It had a good outcome. And the truth is, even Jeanette said this when we spoke to her. She's fine with us continuing to talk about it, because she continues to hope that good things will come out of these first steps in terms of identifying what happened to her sister and her friend. But that's not a typical situation where you have an individual who has gone missing and then is found. Typically, I think for us as members of the public, that ends our involvement with that individual. Hopefully, they're able to get the care they need.
Yes. But in your case, it's still an open investigation, and we're still looking for answers. So we still need to keep probing.
Any final pieces of advice for families who are dealing with missing loved ones and who are trying to navigate the at times treacherous world of both the internet, media, other forms of publicity? What would be like your best 3 pieces of advice?
If a loved one goes missing, please contact law enforcement. You don't have to wait 24 to 48 hours. If your local agency says no, move up to the sheriff's department or the state police. You don't have to take that no for an answer. Be careful on social media. The information that you put out there, please don't share your phone number. It puts you at risk and makes a stressful situation even worse.
Or your personal email address as well.
Correct.
I see that a lot. And remember, any of us can set up, if we're just getting started, another alternate email address.
Yes.
If you have to, you don't have to put up the one that you use on everything unsigned.
You can create a free Gmail account to support your missing loved one or your unsolved case, and keep your private email private, which is also good for your mental health. It gives you a break so that you're not inundated. When you go in to check your email and pay bills, there's not that creepy email sitting there from someone who may or may not be helpful.
And that just causes me such pain, too, when you hear about people who are desperately trying to find their missing loved ones, and then they're hearing from sleazeballs that are looking to capitalize on
or looky-loos.
Other advice that you would have for those individuals?
Yes, take care of yourself. You can. It's a cliche that you can't pour from an empty cup, but I see people when their loved one goes missing that first 24 hours, they're not eating, they're not sleeping, they're not hydrated, they're going to make themselves sick. So I generally check in with families and be like, hey, how are you this morning? Did you eat anything? Do you need some Tylenol? Have you had a glass of water? It's because they forget. They're so stressed. They're like, I can't get anything down. And I'm like, have a glass of water. You have to stay hydrated. If you make yourself sick, you can't look for your loved one. So practicing self-care, short-term and long-term cases, it's incredibly important because it's exhausting work.
Excellent advice. Nina, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, thank you for having me.
That is going to do it for this episode of Mind Over Murder. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
Mind Over Murder is a production of Absolute Zero and Another Dog Productions.
Our executive producers are Bill Thomas and Kristen Dilley.
Our logo art is by Pamela Arnois.
Our theme music is by Kevin MacLeod.
Mind Over Murder is distributed in partnership with Crawlspace Media.
You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
You can also follow our page on the Colonial Parkway Murders on Facebook.
And finally, you can follow Bill Thomas on Twitter at BillThomas56.
Thank you for listening to Mind Over Murder.